Happy holidays, my pookies, my pogchamps, my eager little elves. I couldn't help but overhear that you had been a very good viewer this year, and I thought that you deserved something special for that. So, in recognition of that fact, I got you this assortment of seasonally appropriate etymologies. Enjoy. Angel. A fusion of the English engel with the French angel, which both ultimately come, as all things do, from ancient Greek by way of Latin, where it was originally angelos, which meant messenger, envoy, or one that announces. The word was used in Greek translations of the Bible for the Hebrew word malach, which meant messenger, implied to be the messenger of God. What I find fun about this word is that, had things gone a little bit differently, we may have had the objectively better word erendgast or errand ghost, but we don't get nice things, do we? Jesus. The personal name of the Son of God is likely from the Greek form of the Aramaic proper name Yeshua, meaning God is salvation. This is likely also the source of the name Joshua, and Greek texts actually treat both names as the same thing. To some, it may be a surprise, but there being multiple names from the same origin is really, really common for English biblical names, and, if anything, only two names coming from the same origin is relatively small. Names already kind of behave a bit wonky when sound changes hit due to the kind of environments they tend to be in, but because biblical names tend to be popular in multiple cultures and for long spans of time, they usually make their way to English multiple times after passing through a bunch of different languages. Consider another common biblical boy's name, Jacob. It goes back to the Greek Jakobos, ultimately from the Hebrew name, I don't want to pronounce that, which means something like supplanter. Its list of related names goes on forever, but includes James, Jack, Jackie, Jamie, Jimmy, Jameson, Jeb, and Kobe, to name a few. Christ. Speaking of names for the Son of God, Christ, from whom this very holiday gets its name, Christes Masse, the Mass of Christ, means the anointed, and it comes from Christos, a Greek calque of the Hebrew word Messiah, meaning the same thing, and from which we get the word Messiah. The Greek word goes back to the PIE root grey, which meant to rub. Outside of words for Jesus and his fandom, we don't actually see that many words descended from this root. Most notable among them are the words grime, possibly the word grizzly, though that isn't fully settled, and most interestingly, Kris Kringle. That's right, this one's actually a twofer. Kris Kringle, which I would have assumed to have been a word for Santa before making this video, was given to us by Pennsylvania German, the German variety spoken by the Amish, and is from the German Christkindlein, or Christ child. Now, we've already seen what's up with that Christ part, but what about that other bit, Kindlein? Well, it's a diminutive of the German word Kind, which is related to the English word kin and means child. It goes back to the Proto-Germanic kunya, family, ultimately coming from the PIE root gene. Gene means to give birth or beget. And at this point, if you know your Greek or Latin etymologies, your ears should have perked up, because gene begets so many fun words. There really is far too many to count. Among them we can find cognate, cryogenic, degenerate, eugenics, gender, generic, general, genital, genitive, genius, genocide, German, not that kind though, actually that kind, gonad, gonorrhea, hydrogen, impregnate, innate, jaunty, miscegenation, nada, and Noel. That's right, this one was actually a threefer. Snow. Snow, a common slang term for cocaine, doesn't really have an interesting etymology. It can be traced through a series of earlier words all the way back to the PIE root sniegwa, all of which meant the same thing as the modern word. Wait a second. It's a weather phenomenon? Ice crystals that grow while suspended in the atmosphere, usually within clouds, and then fall accumulating on the ground where they undergo further changes? Huh, that's cool. I've never seen that in California before. Oh, but I guess that does explain why it's on the Christmas etymologies list, though. Well, that explains that. Well, anyway, they can't all be winners. Gift. A gift is a thing given, and that's basically what it meant in Old Norse when they gifted this word to us. It comes from the Proto-Germanic geftes nuts, which comes from a root which was something like geb, which ultimately comes from the PIE root gab, which meant something like to give or receive or maybe hold. That last part is implied, in part from roots associated with hands and the holding of things, like the Latin habere, to have, and the Lithuanian gabana, armful. In the Germanic languages specifically, it's related to words for dowry and marriage and poisons. Interestingly enough, that last one likely comes from an ancient European practice known as killing people. More broadly, the word gift is related to words like able, malady, prohibit, habit, inhabit, exhibit, habeas corpus, debt, debit, and also a bunch of words for hand stuff in other languages. Oh, this is a Christmas special. Get your mind out of the gutter. Merry. Merry is a fun word because it seems to be a near unique branch of its etymological tree. It comes from an Old English word meaning pleasing, agreeable, pleasant, sweet, and exciting feelings of enjoyment and gladness. But before then, it seems to have meant short-lasting, as in the Proto-Germanic word murgias. That root seems to basically go back to the PIE root mregu, which meant short. Other words from the same root include abbreviate, abridge, brace, bracelet, brachiopod, brassiere, brevity, brief, broom, embrace, and most interestingly to me, pretzel. In a lot of these cases, including that last one, it's because the root took on an association with the arms. How do you get pretzel from a word associated with arms? Well, apparently it's because pretzels look like folded arms, and I think that's actually really cute. English probably got the modern meaning of the word merry, though, through the use of it to describe making time pass quickly, which is how it diverges from its more short or arm-associated applications in other languages. Mistletoe. Mistletoe is made up of two bits, the mistle bit and the toe bit. The ending there is less interesting and just comes from a Proto-Germanic root tainon, which meant twig. The mistle bit, however, is... well, unfortunately, it comes from a PIE word meaning to urinate. Mieg. By the way, this is where we get the word mist. Try not to think about that next time it's foggy out. I know I won't be. Eggnog. Nog itself is a word of largely uncertain origins. A common story when looking into words like this, and leads for it drop off in the late 1600s, where it meant a type of beer brewed in Norfolk. It could be related to the word noggin, which referred to a mug or small cup, but that only goes back to the 1620s, and before then, it also fades into obscurity. Egg, on the other hand, has been tracked all the way back to PIE by way of the Old Norse word egg, from the Proto-Germanic ayam, which probably comes from the PIE root oyo. This may likely come from the root awi, meaning bird. If that's true, it could mean that eggnog is related to words like aviary and auspicious. Also cockney, but I'm not covering that today. Bells. The word bell is interesting because it goes back to what I jokingly call the omni root, which approximately 97% of all words in every language ever spoken go back to. That root is bell. I kid, of course, though only a little bit. Bell was actually 3, maybe 4, possibly separate homophones with different meanings, though 2 or maybe 3 of them may have been the same root. At least one of these roots meant something like to roar or sound. That same root may also have meant something like to blow or swell. Given that fact, bell is likely related to words like bellow, belly, billow, bilge, bulge, bowl, bowl, ball, and I swear I wish I were making this up, phallus and Excalibur. Santa. I think we're all pretty familiar with the origins of Santa as coming from Saint Nicholas, but it may be worth discussing his fuzzy flying friends here. The word reindeer itself does not, as I would have initially guessed, come from the word rein. Apparently, even though reindeer are the only semi-domesticated species of deer and are associated with reins, the two words are unrelated. Apparently the rein in reindeer goes back to hrein, the name for the animal in Old Norse, which comes from the Proto-Germanic krinda, which may have come from the PIE root ker, a root meaning horn or head. From that, we get words like cornucopia, cranium, keratin, unicorn, and, appropriate for the season if I say so myself, Capricorn, which is the zodiac sign governing December 22nd through to January 19th. The deer part of reindeer goes back to the Proto-Germanic word deusam, which meant animal, and its descendants still do in a lot of Germanic languages today. This goes potentially as far back as the PIE deusum, creature that breathes, from deu, breath. And, because I know someone in the comments will probably ask after it, the word rein, meaning the straps used to guide an animal, comes from the Latin word retinere, to hold back, coming from the PIE root ten, which meant stretch, and which is spread into words like abstain, intone, temple, tender, tendon, tensile, tent, thin, tantra, sitar, and tennis. Santa's original 8 reindeer were named in A Visit from St. Nicholas, written by Clement C. Moore in 1823. There is Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, and Blitzen. Unfortunately, Dasher doesn't really have too interesting of an etymology, which is sad, but there isn't much I can do about that. Dancer is, like all things in English, ultimately of Latin origin, from the word dantiare, which meant to dance. For some reason, we decided the original English word for the concept, sealtian, also of Latin origin, this time from the verb saltare, which meant to jump, or to dance, wasn't good enough. See my previous comment about angels. Prancer appears to have once been a slang term for a horse, but the verb stem itself is obviously older and might be a variant of the word pranken, to prank, which at the time meant to show off. Prank itself could go back to a few different Proto-Germanic roots, though the exact origin isn't fully clear. Cupid should be easy enough for you to guess the origin of. He was the Roman counterpart to Eros. His name comes from the Latin cupere, meaning to desire. This likely goes back to a root that looked something like quep, and which meant to smoke or boil. This root, from what I can tell, is a bit complicated, but it may mean that Cupid is related to the words vapor and hope. It may also be related to a Proto-Germanic word meaning to choke, but it doesn't seem to be the origin of the modern word to choke. We get the word comet from French, which is just a fancy way of saying we get it from Latin, which is just an old-timey way of saying that we get it from Greek. In this case, the word we get it from is asterkometes, which literally means long-haired star. The origins of kometes, specifically in Greek, is a bit complicated and not entirely clear, but it may not be of Indo-European origins. Vixen, before it described a woman of unchristmasly morals, was a female fox. What's interesting about vixen is that it's the sole survivor of the feminine Germanic suffix n in modern English. Further back, the word comes from a Proto-Germanic word fusas, which ultimately comes from the PIE root puk, meaning tail. In fact, this is where a lot of languages get their word for foxes, their bushy tails. This can be seen in the Spanish word raposo, fox, and its counterpart, raposa, vixen, which comes from the word rabo, tail. By the way, if you're wondering why it's vixen and not fixen, if both fox and vixen come from the same origin, that's because in Old English, the sounds f, th, and sa, and v, the, and z weren't really separate. They were variants of each other, and it wasn't until later stages of English that the distinction fully solidified. Originally, Clement C. Moore named the reindeer Dunder and Blixen. This didn't stick, and I think we are all very, very grateful for that. By the 1860s, he had decided that Donder and Blitzen sounded better, and updated the poem accordingly. Donner didn't become popular until the 20th century, likely influenced by the modern German spelling of the word. Donner itself is etymologically related to the English word thunder, and goes back to the Proto-Germanic thunras, meaning thunder. The ultimate origin of Donner is the PIE root stene, which meant to resound, also thunder. Blitzen, thankfully, is a bit more interesting. It looks like a nominal formation of the Middle High German word meaning to flash, and going back to the Proto-Germanic, blickatian, which itself goes back to the Omni root. though this time it actually comes from the version that meant to shine, flash, or burn. Bell. Bell was an incredibly productive root, and because blitzing goes back to it, this means that it's related to the following English words: black, blue, blank, bleak, bleach, blush, blind, blonde, and blend. It's also related to flame, flamingo, flagrant, flambe, phlegm, inflame, flammable, inflammable, conflagration, deflagration, phlogiston, and riboflavin, among others. Others including... Huh? What? What do you mean I have to move on? No. It's just capitalist propaganda. I'm not talking about it. I do not care if angels we have heard on high are telling us to go out and buy. I won't do it. Oh, fine, but only because you're so nice. Now, in my house, we only believe in the traditional 8, but fine. Since people would probably be mad if I didn't do it, I will cover your freak deer. Rudolph was invented to sell coloring books in 1939. He's going to be under copyright for another decade. The name Rudolph comes from 2 Germanic words meaning famed wolf, and the wolf part goes back to a PIE root, which meant the same thing and from which we basically only get words for wolves. Are you happy now? Good, because I have some stuff to say. Viewer, it has been a terrible year. Some of the highlights involve multiple nervous breakdowns, burnout, blackmail, adultery, a few friend group explosions, moving to a new apartment, job hunting being horrible, patreon.com/outtopian, too many Santa darn secrets, lies out the wazoo, and a partridge in a pear tree. I'm sorry for not being as active as I would want to be. I've had a lot on my plate. Thanks Santa that I prepared this video script last year because, oh goodness, I needed to feel like I got something done. In other news, I started my master's program, and that's going well. As I write and record this section, it looks like I will have straight A's for the first semester, and my computational linguistics project is looking to be statistically significant. So hopefully I can get a video out about that soon. It's on Wikipedia's bias in its articles, and it's proven very fun. But enough about me and my terrible year. Viewer, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I know the holidays are a trash time of year. No one has any fun. Either you're stressed about hosting, or you're stressed about seeing family, or you're stressed because you don't have anyone to spend it with, and that sucks. As a general rule, the holidays are a disaster. To be honest, the whole year is a non-stop onslaught of reindeer droppings and metaphorical stalking coal. But you're handling it so well. You've nearly made it to next year, and I'm so happy for that. Good job. Go get yourself a cookie. You deserve it.